Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bad and the Worst, a podcast where we pick apart movie trilogies and decide which film really let the team down. I'm your host Greiner, and joining me today...
I'm Morgan. Dodge this.
And my name is Mr. Anderson, and my eyes hurt, because I've never used them before.
Of course, today we are looking at the Matrix trilogy. The Matrix trilogy started in 1999 with The Matrix, and concluded in 2003 with Reloaded and Revolutions. It's no secret that the sequels are kind of a letdown to the original. Rotten Tomatoes rates them at 88%, 73% and 35% respectively. So there's kind of a huge drop-off in the critical reception. So how do you guys feel about the Matrix trilogy?
I think one of them's good. I think the original film is pretty pivotal to science fiction and to 21st century cinema. I think it's also a good flagship for how wrong trilogies can go and how often entities don't need to be made past one film, and how studios sort of desire for, cashing in on that can really go bad.
Luke, your opinions on The Matrix?
I think The Matrix, it's always been like a pillar of movies and like trilogies even, but it's a weird trilogy where I pretty much only ever remember The Matrix, and when I hear The Matrix I think of the first movie. And sort of, I don't know if it's just a thing I've done to myself, just forgotten about the other two, even though I know they're there, like looming in the darkness, but I never think about them. I just think about the first one and I'm like, wow, that was a great film, as if they're not canon or something like that, but they do exist and they're there. And we watch them.
You're right. You're right. The other two films definitely let it down a lot. And in my quick research, I found that they actually consider the Matrix trilogy one of those trilogies that kicked off Hollywood's obsession with trilogies. Like there was this and Lord of the Rings were two of the particular ones they called out on what made trilogies become a lot more common in the early 2000s. What do you guys think about that?
Well, that's interesting because the critical reception was so bad that I thought that this would have almost turned them off that. I guess like we were talking about earlier, where they were filmed back to back, so there was kind of a 6-month gap between them. The idea was already sealed in there. I think I was reading somewhere Reloaded was like the highest grossing R-rated film for a long time until Deadpool. So it obviously was super successful. It's just that I didn't see what Revolution's earnings were, but I can't imagine it was good.
I looked at this, and it actually made less than the first film. Which the first film's kind of infamous for doing very well in the cinema, but also having a huge tail in DVD and that sort of thing. Yeah. It's one of those early DVD movies, one of those early showpiece movies for high definition. I remember it being really popular for that. So, do you guys believe this deserves to be a trilogy, Luke?
No. I almost feel like even as open-ended and sort of not finished the first film ends it with, I feel like it'd be a great story on its own and never following after that, because it does. Like I can look back on that first film and look at it start to finish and be like, wow, that was a great film, without having to continue on down the rest or even think about what happens the rest. You don't need to know that as far as I'm concerned. Obviously at the time I would have been like, yes, I want more of these, but we didn't get it. So in hindsight, I don't think it should be a trilogy.
Conan, how do you feel?
Do you guys think they had a trilogy in mind when they made this first one, when they wrote the script? Do you think the Wachowskis knew there was a bigger universe to hopefully explore, or do you think it was just luck?
Well, no, I don't think they did. And I think I was going to argue the point earlier that it really sort of set the benchmark for trilogies, because 2 and 3 came out in 2003. By that point, Return of the King had already been, was coming in 2003. And correct? Yeah, 2003, Return of the King came out. And I think so Lord of the Rings is what did that for trilogies, because 2001, 2002, 2003, 1 year after another, filmed all in the one big go. And I think that is the movie that put trilogies on the map. Obviously, at the same time, Star Wars was doing it around the same time period. But Matrix, I think, was its own film. And then due to the success, they've gone and done this, added on there and been like, hey, now we have a bigger budget. How many explosions can we put in this?
I just feel like they made such a cool universe. Like I still want to see more of that. Like I think there is ideas they can explore in that universe, and I agree that the second and third movies didn't do it very well. But I still think that the idea of the Matrix, the universe they created in that first movie, is deserving of a trilogy. Is deserving of more exploration. What do you guys think?
I think it's deserving of more outside of those films. I think it's one of those universes where the main narrative is kind of less interesting than all the outside stories. Like, did either of you guys see the Animatrix?
I did, like way back when. I did, yeah.
I've never
Luke?
watched it. I was about to ask that actually because I
Yeah.
read about it this week.
So I saw it, years ago, and I don't remember much, but I remember thinking it was just kind of that cool idea of fleshing out the world beyond the main story. And it seems to be that the main narrative is kind of used in the other two films, but also gets just really incorrectly done. Like Neo's story, he ceases to be. He just sort of becomes a weird touchstone. He's not actually a character we care about. We're just kind of watching this. I don't know, watching the spectacle. The narrative feels so clunky, whereas in the first one, you obviously have such a tight narrative of the audience is Neo, and we are learning as he's learning, and it's a really tight film for that. I think there could have even been like a sequel or like an expansion on the first film itself in terms of how his life gets affected and how he starts to see weirder things, like combining elements of the Animatrix and those sort of obscure side parts of real life into him, and then fleshing out that world. But after the ending of the first one, I think the story beyond there is really redundant.
So that really leads us in. Who wins the wooden spoon? Luke, your worst film out of the trilogy?
So I was expecting this to be a different answer. Thinking back on when I watched them 10 years ago, I totally remembered liking Reloaded more than it's Revelations, isn't it?
Revolutions.
The third one. It's one of the Revolutions. Okay, I knew it was one of them.
Like a circle.
But honestly, I give my wooden spoon to Reloaded. It I watched them like one night after the other, and watching it a night after The Matrix was just such a drop in quality, and I couldn't keep my attention. Like I was so bored. My wife and I watched it, and we were both sitting there like, "What happened? What happened with these people? And what is this movie about?" I didn't know what was going on. There's the whole rave orgy scene, which goes for about 40 minutes, and
Best
I
scene of
do
the
not
film.
understand it. There was legitimately 5 times during that scene, my wife and I looked at each other and like, this is still going. Like, what is this like movie? It seems like it's a completely different tone and vibe from the first one. Then I was expecting, well, Revelations has half the score on Rotten Tomatoes as this one does. I don't know how it could be worse, but at least it was entertaining. Probably isn't a better film, but Revelations was entertaining in a dumb, entertaining sort of way. Not a great entertaining, but I found it more entertaining, and I was like, man, I like it more. So Reloaded gets my wooden spoon.
Firstly, I haven't seen Matrix Revelations. I've seen Matrix Revolutions, and that was a
Oh my
that was a
God.
bad film. But I want to
So
see Matrix
memorable.
Revelations. It sounds terrible.
It's great.
Conan, I feel like you're going to have a revelation with a different idea on what's going to be the worst movie.
I am. So I'm gonna defend Reloaded here, which I feel stupid for doing, but I had the same thing. I had the same thoughts of. I remember watching these back in the day. I know when I was a teenager, and then hating them and never watching them since. So I went into both of these pretty not excited, but with sort of a little bit of eagerness to see if I would, 15 years had sort of changed my interpretation. And not much had changed. I remember thinking Revolutions was the worst, and I still feel that way. I remember within 24 hours of watching it, I was trying to think back on what happened, and I couldn't figure out. I don't know what happens in that film. There is so much just dead space and nothing. And Reload has a lot of the same issues, but I think Reloaded has much better set pieces and moments. I'm like, yeah, I remember those. Those are kind of cool. Whereas Revolutions is just so sloppy and it's just dull. Yeah.
I feel like I get the deciding vote here. I found it so hard to separate these two movies. Like, it's very clear that they were shot together, and the fact that they released them in the same year, which I don't know, blew my mind when I read that.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Like, there was just no way for them to get feedback on how Reloaded was received, and so they were very hard to separate for me. I will totally agree with Luke. Reloaded is kind of bad, like really
They're
bad.
both
Like
bad.
they're both bad. Hear me out. I agree. The orgy rave scene is just terrible. It's criminal. It's so they get all right. So Morpheus gives a speech, right? Morpheus gives a speech in that cave, and the whole first movie, I was just like, how cool is like the way Morpheus speaks, the rhythm he has when he speaks. He reminds me of like a Baptist preacher who's just got this really smooth way of talking. He's always giving a sermon. I feel like, and then they actually get him to give a sermon, and he's yelling, and he loses all that tempo and that beat that he has throughout all the other movies, and it just ruins it. It's a pointless speech that goes nowhere.
It's like he was channeling that scene from The Warriors where he gets up, "Can you dig it?" And the whole time I'm waiting for him to drop that, and he just never does. I'm like, man, what is his motivation here?
That's the thing.
Yeah.
They're both bad. They're both very bad movies. One's the bad and one's the worst in this thing. But with Reloaded, throughout the whole movie, I was just like, man, this is bad. It starts and Trinity falls for like 20 minutes, and it's like as soon as she's falling and doing the shooting and everything like that, it's instantly like, okay, this is not what the first one was at all. And it's like basically after the first one, it's like, okay, these characters are cool. People think these characters are cool, so let's make these characters cool. And the characters act as if they're cool, like they know they're cool in the second one, as opposed to just being cool like they are in the first one. And there's nothing cool about it. It's just bad. And like we've said a few times, the orgy rave scene for 40 minutes
The best
is a
scene.
bit much and makes no sense. I just don't get what's happening or
It's
why
a
it's
metaphor.
What's it a metaphor for?
Well, see, sex is a metaphor for love in cinema. And so it's just a really long sex scene, meaning everyone's happy now.
To me, it's showing their humanity. But the thing, that's not even the thing I hated the most about Reloaded. Reloaded has way more dialogue where there's two characters trying to be really clever, and the Wachowskis just don't have the writing chops for it. I don't think. Like they get into Zion, and the leader takes Neon down to the robots underneath, and it's supposed to be some metaphor for how we're relying on the robots, but we have to maintain the robots, and they're relying on us. And he just spells it out. He doesn't leave anything for metaphor. He just I don't know, exactly explains his point as it is, and it just sucks. And then, or not even the worst character for it, the Merovingian. That character
Oh my god.
that character needs to be cut from the whole movie, in my opinion. Both of them.
Yeah, I don't understand his role at all. I think he doesn't have a role.
No.
Was, when he showed up again in the third one, I was like, oh no, I didn't know he was in this. And then I read he's cast in the fourth one, and I was like, what is happening?
They really
I don't
like
get
that
it with this character. I don't get it. I will say, because Conan said the thing about the set pieces in the second one, the highway chase scene is the only thing that stands out in that movie and that I remember.
Phenomenal.
But there's so many other set pieces in that are genuinely bad. Like 100 Smiths versus Neo is so bad.
Yeah, the CGI has not aged well in that scene. My gosh.
There's 5 minutes of that fight scene where there's not a single thing on the screen that's actually filmed. It's just all CGI. There's PS2 Neo fighting PS1 Smiths everywhere, and it's bad.
But I think that chase scene alone makes that film better than Revolutions. All Revolutions has is literally a mech suit, which is so dumb. That whole mech battle is so bland. Oh, it's so boring. Every time, so boring. Man. And then the fight scene
shooting, so many machines.
Exactly, it's literally just like flashing lights. It's so bad. The only good part is when Tanaka dies and he gets like sliced up by the tentacles. That was cool.
I'm a big fan of mech suits, and I kind of like that scene. I kind of like that whole thing, and I know it's not good, but I kind of enjoy just these dudes just spraying bullets into this hole for 5 minutes.
Yep. So I think that whole part personifies why I think Revolutions is the worst. So even though Reloaded is really bad, and I don't like the fact that I'm defending it, it still feels like a Matrix film in a lot of ways. It still has sort of the weird sort of, the chase between them and the agents and Smith in the Matrix. It still has all the sort of stuff that all the same ingredients of the first one. Whereas most of Revolutions isn't even in the Matrix. It's what is it? There's the train scene. What the hell is the train station?
Terrible. So bad.
It's so superfluous. And they've got Bruce Spence in there, and he's just for nothing. He does nothing. So they've got that. Then there's all this going on where they're on the ship, and Bane turns up, and there's 20 minutes in the Matrix in that film. It's not a Matrix film. It's like fan fiction where they couldn't get the rights to it. It's like Reloaded is at least a Matrix movie.
Yeah, that was where I was going to land eventually. Is that Reloaded is a better Matrix film, even though I kind of enjoyed the mech scene in the third one. They didn't spend enough time in the Matrix, and there's too many stupid things they end up doing. Like that the train scene is just awful. The whole machines can love thing makes no sense.
No, it
goes
doesn't.
nowhere, does nothing for anybody.
Luke, were you a big fan of that?
What the
seeing
machine?
as you love Interstellar and you love
man,
blatantly
you beat
blatantly
me to
explaining that love is the core.
Literally, my quip at the start of this was going to be like, "It's love, Murph. It's love," and that was one of my notes about the third film. Was it's all love?
Oh,
That's what it comes down to. Oh no, I'm not a fan of pretty much anything in the last two movies, but I will say one thing about Reloaded though that just stuck with me so much when it happened, and I was like, man, its ending is like so much like an episode of TV. It's not a movie ending at all. It's literally like an episode of season 3 Lost. Not even season 1 Lost. It's like the finale of a season 3 episode of Lost where they're like, oh, there was one person left alive and it's the guy in the room with Neo. Come back for our next movie, in 7 months. It's such a weak ending. But then the third one had a weak ending as well. So
it's kind of a mercy that they both came out in the same year because that ending just was the typical, you're right, TV cliffhanger. Stick around to binge watch the next episode.
Yeah.
So I think even though I know Luke doesn't agree, I think we're going to give the wooden spoon to Revolutions,
which I'm fine with. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to defend it.
They're both terribly weak films, but
I will just say I found it more entertaining. That's the only thing I can say. Found it more entertaining. I don't think it's a better film than any film, but
I'm genuinely glad you were entertained by it. I was just.
Yep. And the mech scene was entertaining, man, in just a
I agree.
sort of way. It just, I don't know why it reminded me of Avatar as well, and I was just like, oh, these mech, I forgot about the mech suits somehow. And like the kid running the ammo out, and it's all dramatic, and it's like, oh, it was entertaining.
He is the worst character. He gets the wooden spoon of characters, that kid.
He gets the final moment in the movie, it feels like, just telling everyone that the war is over, and I'm like, oh, what? I was like, that's how it was just, I was so keen for just this giant tentacle to fly through his head, and it just bursts apart. And that's when the Sentinels actually surprised. Like, that would have been a good movie moment. Matrix 4.
Okay, so who is to blame for this mess? Who do we lay the blame on, Conan?
I think it's a combination of things. I think this, like I was saying earlier, I think this is really indicative of studio interference gone awry, and it's kind of trite to talk about that now because everyone knows as soon as a studio wants something more from an entity that it usually goes bad. And so this seems like, Matrix took the world by storm, and it was risky. Like the script from the get-go, even though people liked it, it was risky, and it was hard to sort of get people invested in seeing if it was going to be made because it seemed like it was just too philosophical, too sciencey to sort of really sell a AAA blockbuster film slot. But because of its success, I think they just said, all right, let's double down. And so then you've really got, I don't know, it's a combination of that along with the writers, along with, I think, filming 2 films back to back like that. Like there was a really interesting thing with the director of photography, Bill Pope. He talked to Roger Deakins in their podcast, and he mentioned how it was just this numbing experience, and how the magic of what of making the first film was completely gone. It just became this like studio corporate model, whereas like over 200 days shooting, just non-stop, just relentless. And so it was just like an arduous chore, and so that really killed it for them, it seems. And then he also mentioned, which was really fascinating, that the Wachowskis seem to prescribe to that philosophy of I think Kubrick had it, and Fincher does it as well, and I think Alfred Hitchcock was one who'd practiced it. But the idea that actors need to be like broken down before they give you a good performance. And so they just take 100 different takes of one scene. So the actor is just so dead-eyed by the end that the theory is, they just show their purest self, or like their instinct takes over. And it seems like, so you're filming 2 films and they've got this sort of wanky, like, oh, we are the new Kubricks now. We're filming our own 2001: A Space Odyssey. Let's go for broke. And it just, yeah, they don't have the writing chops. They don't have the directing. Like, they're not great directors. And just, I think it's a real mess.
I think they're better directors than they are writers. Like, there's some they have to have credit for the first movie. The first movie is really a good film, right? And I think there's really good action set pieces, and I think there's really good fight choreography, which I know doesn't come down to them necessarily, but like, I think they deserve some respect for that. But yeah, I'm not a fan of their writing, particularly in the last 2. I think the thing that they succeeded with in the first one is that they had this concept that they had to get across the line to everyone, that, hey, the world is a simulation. And so when you're trying to convince people of that, you can write dialogue that works towards that. And I think that really gave them a leg up, whereas in the second and third movies, they just sort of floundered. And they tried all this high concept philosophizing, and it just didn't work.
And what they did, there's the perfect there's a great video from the lessons from the screenplay guy. He talked about how it's like exposition in action, and that's exactly what they do so well in the first film. They combine exposition with constant visuals, and it feels like all the questions that Neo has, we have. And so every time Morpheus gives an answer in his vague, let's say, Baptist way of speaking, there's always a really interesting visual to accompany it. Whereas in 2 and 3, like I say, it's just people in rooms. Every scene is just a conversation, and there's nothing worth watching. And it's like, it really shows, they had this great concept and they knew how to actually discuss it. But then when it's like, let's just talk philosophy for the next 2 films, it just falls apart.
Luke, do you have a differing opinion, or you agree the directors really flubbed this one?
Yeah, and I think it falls on the writing, but I think a lot of it comes from the studio as well, because it's very obvious that they basically said, let's do the Matrix again, but turn it up to 100. Like, let's get more CGI. Let's be more cool. Like, hey, Hugo Weaving was awesome as Mr. Smith. How about there's 100 of him? That's going to be 100 times better, even though it's 100 times worse, because less is more with this trilogy, and Mr. Smith is amazing in the first one.
That's Agent Smith to you.
Oh, yeah. Agent Smith is like amazing in the first one, and then he's not a threat in 2 and 3 when he's meant to be a threat, and he's really not. He has no impact at all in the last 2 films.
They really needed to give him more to do, because he was. I really enjoyed him in the first movie, especially watching it again. Like, so menacing, and just like Morpheus had his way of speaking, so did Agent Smith, and they played across each other well. It was riveting to watch, and they definitely didn't give him enough to do in the next few movies.
I need to defend, actually, in Revolutions, the whole point of the train scene and the whole point of that love is machines can love. What's the little girl's name? Nafti or Nati or something?
Nati.
It's Sati.
Sati. So that did make, when Agent Smith, we don't see it, but then we know that he silverfies her. That's evil. That's messed up. He has something to work with in number 3, is my point.
They're trying to give us something to care about. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're doing that just to prove how men. I think that's maybe it's one of the ideas, but to prove how evil Agent Smith is, that he would even silverfy a girl. He has no qualms.
I think he's very evil laugh after he silverfied the Oracle. Really, really, with that big grin, showed how much of an evil man he was. So, yeah, it did enough for me there.
I don't laugh unless I'm evil.
Who deserved better out of these movies? Is there a standout in the last 2 movies that you think outperformed the material, or what do you think, Luke?
I think Keanu Reeves always deserves better, but honestly, I don't know. I feel bad for everyone involved in these movies. Lawrence Fishburne, I think his performance, and obviously we just discussed Hugo Weaving, I think they deserve better after what they did in the first film. Those characters in the first film are such iconic characters based off their performances and the way they play those characters, and I don't think it falls on them how they were portrayed in 2 and 3. That falls on the writers, and I think, so Hugo Weaving and Lawrence Fishburne got the short end of the stick.
Yeah, I think that this film really had a weird impact on everyone's careers after it. Like, Keanu became synonymous with Neo for years. I read somewhere where Carrie Ann Moss said she couldn't wear sunglasses out in public because people just recognize her straight away. Lawrence Fishburne sort of had his career, like he could have been like Samuel L. Jackson, Morgan Freeman movie star in a different world, but I really think this film actually impacted him a lot. Where for a while, like for the next 5-10 years, he really didn't do much, and even now he's coming back in sort of smaller, like more obscure roles. But he really should have been something bigger than he was, and I think these films are sort of to blame for that.
What do you guys think? What do you think about the fight choreography, like the fight design and the way the fight's carried out in these movies? Do you think? I personally really enjoyed them, and watching them now in an age where shaky cam has become the de facto way to film an action scene, watching a scene that's like perfectly still and these two people basically dance with each other, I really enjoyed that. And I think it kept that up in the last two movies. Like I think when there is that fighting, even though it doesn't happen much in Revolutions, I still think it's well done. When it's two people, as soon as they start getting CGI in there, it gets strange. But yeah, I really enjoyed. I don't know if we ever get to go back to non-shaky cam action, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I think the shaky cam does a really good job at hiding the seams. I think you do see the seams a bit. You see the dance moves happening in the Matrix.
You do, but that's part of I think that's part of the whole suspension of disbelief, and it works so well in the Matrix because it literally, it says in the front, this is not reality. So you've sort of got that wire fu, and you've got this way over the top where you're constantly thinking like, this isn't a real fight. This feels weird that people are just like leaping and floating and jumping off walls. But whereas in obviously the sort of the like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon genre that really blew that up, where in there it's kind of just a weird stylistic choice. In this it works better because it's like this actually, it makes sense. You're breaking the rules of gravity, so it all feels really neat and perfect in the cinematic world.
Yep.
And I agree. I love not having to just like have a seizure during the film or get motion sickness. Like, screw you, Bourne. Screw you and your trilogy.
Yeah. I agree, and I think like definitely in the first movie, obviously it gets to a bit of a CGI and the mess, but like in the other two films, but like Greiner said, when it's one-on-one, it is still very solid, and it does make sense because they're bending the rules of like gravity and everything like that, and because they are literally like programmed with these moves as opposed to learning them and studying them themselves. They're just programmed, so they're doing the basic movements that sort of thing. So it does come across like that. So I think it makes sense, and they are really good, and it's still entertaining to watch. I think so.
The one thing I did have watching the second one was like, why doesn't Neo just use a knife? Why doesn't he just literally get a knife and just like get one good slice off agents down?
Why can nobody shoot straight in this movie? They all went to the Stormtrooper School of Shooting.
Yeah, that's also true.
Shoot the walls! Shoot the walls!
They establish that people can dodge bullets, and then they use a really cool scene to showcase it, and then they never do that again. Just people miss. That sucked.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that whole Trinity falling out of the building, and there's like 30 bullets.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's in one direction. It's not hard to... I can't imagine it's hard to hit.
No, I totally agree. The other thing I thought that deserved better was the concept of the Matrix. I really think there's a cool universe there to explore, and I don't think we've seen enough of it. I think Animatrix proves that because I do remember that being really entertaining, and obviously the first movie sets it up really well.
I agree. I think it is a deep, like it's a fleshed out world, even though a lot of their explanation, their execution is really bad. There is clearly stuff there they've thought about. So I'm excited to see what they do with number 4. I have no idea what they'll do.
Yeah, we'll get to that later. Let's talk about number 4 later because I do want to talk about it. But do you guys have any ideas how we fix these movies, Luke?
Delete them.
Delete them.
No, it's just, I don't know. I feel like, honestly, it would have benefited from just not trying to do it because the first was so popular, and if they'd actually just done it with like 2 movies in mind and done a sequel to The Matrix and just focused on just, I don't know. I feel like 3 is a failure because of what 2 was doing, because I think they're the same. It's one movie. It is just one movie. It's really very hard to separate them. It's just a credit scene between them. That's it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm not a movie director or anything like that, or So I'm not sure what they could have done differently, but I know there's a lot that they could have done differently to make it better. Like if we could have just had another simple sequel in the same sort of vein as the first one, where it was I don't know, grounded's weird, but I don't know. I feel like the first one was very. Even now, it's still relevant to today. Like it's watching it, and it is sort of. We are all like plugged in or whatever, and it's simple. It's simple, but it's out of this world, and it was great. So I think they just did way too much. So they should have just dialed it back.
It has ironically sort of aged really well with the way the internet's just gotten bigger and more necessary to our lives. This idea of being linked into something and sort of this projection of yourself and how there's a life in there versus a life out here and how they impact each other and how you can die in there. It's really it's kind of poignant. It's like how we actually do live in this simulation, even if we don't truly live in this simulation. We kind of didn't heed the warning and made the Matrix, and we all willingly plug into it via nifty little mobile phones.
So Matrix 4 is about social media.
Just a very blunt critique, hopefully.
What do you reckon, Greiner?
I have a comprehensive plan on how to fix these movies. Do you guys want to hear it?
Can I give my 30-second one real quick?
Yes, please do.
So 2 and 3 get cut into one film or something. Or alternatively, there's a sequel where after Neo finds out who he is, and after he has the conversation with the architect, great conversation, by the way, don't listen to the haters, good scene, he finds out that the entire world, like planet Earth outside of the Matrix, is also a distraction, and the machines are doing something bigger. And it's like, okay, so Neo's had to already learn that he's in a lie once. He's had to learn the rules and become the one in the fake world. In the sequel, he has to do the exact same thing in the real world. And so he can't rely on cool computer hacks. He actually has to properly be like, I've got to become a real person. And so it's got elements of Pinocchio in there, and it's just, it's family fun.
One of my biggest problems with the sequels is that they start giving you powers outside of the Matrix. Man, that bothered me so much.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
You're just trying to double down on that. Look, here's how you fix the Matrix sequels. Firstly, you make the Matrix intrinsically linked to the other machines. So you design it so that, and I actually had a look at this, and apparently originally they were going to do this, that the Matrix is a neural network, that they're using the processing power of the human brain as their processors rather than just as a battery. Unfortunately, a battery is a lot easier to understand than what a neural network is, so they didn't go that route. But if the human race is part of the processor, then the Matrix is intrinsically linked to the machines and how they run, and therefore Neo can defeat the machines from within the Matrix. He doesn't need to go to the source. He doesn't need to fly around on the surface of the planet. He just needs to fight within the Matrix in the cool scenes that we really enjoyed in the first movie to defeat the Matrix. That's the first step. So you take away his powers outside of the Matrix. I think you still have scenes outside of the Matrix. I quite enjoyed the small scenes, particularly in the first movie, where you get a glimpse of the bigger world. I think the third movie still has the machines bearing down on Zion, but the people in Zion are protecting Neo while he's in the Matrix defeating the machines. That's what I think. Finally, I think Agent Smith deserves better. This is my final point, actually. There's a few more points. Agent Smith deserves better. I do like the idea of him being a virus and being a third party, so he's not on the team of the machines. The replication thing I don't think was handled great, but I think it's an okay concept. But I really like the idea of him going rogue and becoming a virus. I think give him more to do. Maybe make him the main bad guy of the second one and don't even really involve the machines all that much. And then finally, I think you get rid of all the other machines from within the Matrix, almost all the others. You get rid of the Merovingian. I think the Oracle still remains a machine. I think the Keymaker's okay, and I think the Architect's okay, because I quite enjoy that conversation. But I think you get rid of the Merovingian and all the other programs that are with him. And I think you have a third party that's people who are in the Matrix but are aware it's the Matrix and are using that to leverage their power over other people within the Matrix. Because there's people who would want to do that, just like Cyrus the Virus in the first one wanted to do. He wanted to be reinserted back into the Matrix and be made powerful. There has to be people within the Matrix who know about the Matrix but aren't on the team of Zion. There has to be. It doesn't make any sense that there isn't.
That would be a good film. I would like that.
Take out the Merovingian and replace him with the Mafia, who are these other people who are working against Zion. They're working against Zion. They're not necessarily with the machines, but the machines tolerate them because they're kind of, enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, and like a third party there, and they're trying to stop Neo as well. They like this guy's going to screw it up for all of us, sort of thing. Yeah, they enjoy this. They're like, yeah, this is great. And we're the kings of this world.
Yeah, they know how crappy the real world is. Why would they want to be out there?
Exactly. The only thing I will say as well, what I would do to fix the third movie is I feel like Trinity's death scene should be a bit longer. It was a bit too short. There was only like 15, 20 minutes of her dying dramatically. It should be at least 30 minutes or so of her slowly whispering. So,
why did they make him blind? I don't really understand what they achieved with that. Is there some symbolism I'm missing there?
Look, there's so much biblical symbolism in here.
There totally is. You're right.
It doesn't have any relevance. Like, it doesn't. I was trying to figure it out. Like, why is the ship called the Nebuchadnezzar? Like, it has a really, really loose idea, but I'm like, it doesn't really mean anything. I think it's kind of that same thing, the blind leading the blind, and like, truly, seeing the world for what it's. There's a lot of weird stuff in there that I don't know.
Yeah, I thought of the blind leading the blind too, but it just it lasts. It's only for the last 15 minutes of the movie. It never means anything. He still can see because he's got some weird Matrix vision outside of the Matrix.
I completely forgot about it, and when it happened, I was like, "Oh crap, that's right." I put it in the notes. I was like, "I forgot about Daredevil Neo. I forgot that he loses his eyes."
Do you guys agree that he has to die at the end?
So did he die at the end? I don't even remember that.
It's not made clear, but it's implied.
Apparently it is. Apparently it's he sacrificed himself for that. And after I watched it, I was like, oh, he died. I was like, yeah, okay then.
Yes,
it really loses impact. The end of the third movie is so anticlimactic. I feel like there's no dramatic. Yeah, I don't know. It's just,
I feel like Neo dying as the savior though is the right. I think it's the right ending. I just don't think they got there the right way.
It does, especially if Trinity's going to die, which doesn't need to happen the way it did. But again, it does fit well with the whole idea of destiny and sacrifice and this the broader biblical thing they're going for. It would seem weird if Neo comes out and he's just like, now I hang out with my friend Morpheus and we just shoot the shit for the next few years.
Okay, so do you guys have anything more you want to say about the bad films in this trilogy before we move on to the good one?
We haven't. So yeah, I was going to make a joke that we haven't really discussed the worst one yet, which was the Matrix one, but we're going into that in the next one.
I have a few thoughts I want to really briefly touch on.
Yeah.
So, is it just me, or does Neo and Trinity, do they have any chemistry at all? Because I was shocked at how little I believed any of their relationship, in Reloaded especially, but in both of them, it was the most weirdly mechanical thing.
I feel like they do in the first one. I feel like they do have chemistry in the first one, and then after the orgy scene, it's just lost. It's just gone. That chemistry's just sweated away.
It's all lost in a bed of naked bodies.
I think,
like sweat in the rain, or tears in the rain, in a massive 40-minute orgy.
I think the problem is that they kept trying to push love as the emotion that's the answer to all their problems. I think love's kind of a boring emotion. Like, why don't they talk about hope, which is kind of boring too. But I just feel like there's a more like, it's almost like a Sleeping Beauty scene at the end of the first one where he's dying and she kisses him. It's just very Disney-esque and kind of dumb.
That scene was bad when there's lasers going around. Anytime there's like carnage going around and people have they've got their adrenaline controlled enough to be like, I'm just going to have a quiet conversation with somebody, I check out. It's bullshit. She would be screaming, and Neo would be getting cut up with lasers. There'd be no time to stop and actually whisper stuff.
Yeah.
I did have more to talk about.
Yeah, go for it.
I just have a lot of random sort of comments mainly. So, do we like the Keymaker?
I don't particularly like the Keymaker. The only thing I like about the Keymaker is he sets up this is my other idea that I didn't touch on before, but he does set up the idea of a heist, and I think
Oh, yeah.
a heist is how they should have gone into the third one. So the third one should have been a heist to defeat the Matrix of some sort. This thing where some people have got to be across town, and then they didn't make it, so Trinity's got to jump in and do the job. Like, I think that scene was okay.
So are you saying that this should be a Christopher Nolan directed trilogy?
I'd watch a Christopher
Man.
Nolan remake of The Matrix.
Oh my god, Christopher Nolan Matrix? Yes, please.
One thing he does, it's heists.
Man. I would love that. Bring
How much
Leonardo
did- how much-
DiCaprio in it. Leo and Neo. One-on-one.
Leo the Neo. How much of an influence do you reckon this film had on Nolan's filmography?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about it. It
First
just
one
had
to.
it just had such an impact on using slow motion and those pans around things that are moving slowly. I feel like Nolan's made good use of that over the years.
That's the thing. Like the scenes in the first one, I feel like they look so much better than scenes from 2 and 3. Like Neo dodging the bullets still looks good, and obviously
phenomenal.
that's because they did it in like a physical way. Like, you know, it wasn't CGI or anything like that, but that still looks cool. And there's like nothing that comes close to that in the next two films.
It's like you said, it's definitely less is more. And I think by having just literally those brief scenes in the first one, it really does make you think. It makes you think, wow, there's a whole universe outside of here. But the great irony is once you sort of flesh that out, it really kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
And so I want an answer. Why can Neo stop things in the real world? Like, why?
All right, here's the thing. They do have a port in the back of their head. They can download knowledge. Why can't he have like some Wi-Fi connection to the other robots?
He has a dongle in the back of his head.
I don't know. It's dumb. His consciousness becoming disconnected from him and staying in the Matrix was the worst. I also didn't like Agent Smith becoming Bane, although I enjoyed Bane imitating Agent Smith.
I thought that was cool. I thought that idea of like, what is it? So that they should have fleshed that out into something bigger than just like, because they just go for the same Cypher Judas thing again, where this guy and a crew betrays everyone. But I thought that would have been it's really fertile ground for like philosophy of what happens when a computer program's intelligence and consciousness gets into the human world. And they really briefly touch on it where he's got all the cuts on his arms. So it's like he's figuring out what pain is. But that could have been a whole big thing of like how he tries to process, and maybe he falls in love and then he kills that love. And it just becomes this weird mess of like, what even is human nature? Because he's more human than any of us in this grand way. That's in the fourth Matrix.
Maybe. In the vein of unanswerable questions, why does like the Oracle want to end the war? I don't understand why any program wouldn't be on the side of the other programs. Like, I can understand, like I can handle Agent Smith being an anomaly and being like going rogue, but like the Oracle's just straight up helping the people, and so's the Keymaker. Just don't understand it. I don't understand why.
Yeah, I had that as well. I was like, why is any of this really happening? Why has the Matrix happened 6 times and this is the time that everyone's like, let's stop this cycle? And I guess there is just a whole, it's just how it goes. But I feel like that undermines the whole idea of fate and destiny repeating itself.
I kind of enjoyed the Matrix repeating itself.
I like that, but I don't.
Concept.
Yeah, that's why I think the architect conversation is so good, because it's actually kind of this giant bombshell of like, wow, there's this. Yeah, I don't understand, and that's that the world beyond what I thought is I still don't understand everything about it. It kind of expands it again. But yeah, I agree. I guess they briefly touch on it with the Merovingian sort of mentioning how he collects rogue programs, and the ghosts were meant to be deleted, and there's vampires and werewolves that are sort of this weird, like they shouldn't exist, but they kind of, I don't know, I guess it's filtering into that whole sentience creates love and humanity, even though they're not humans, and that's why they want to end it, because it's like these are people too, but they're not people, they're machines, but they are people, because aren't people just machines in this world?
Love, Murph. That answers all your questions.
See, Christopher Nolan watched these films before making his worst film, Interstellar, and was like, love, man. And that's
Can
That's
we
what
all
we got.
agree the ghosts were underused? I quite enjoyed them.
They were awesome.
Visually,
in-
they were very cool, and
They had different power, an interesting power.
Hmm.
But then
I
they were
wanted to
just
see
there for
What
one
happened
scene.
to them? Did they just
Nothing.
Did they
They just got
die?
left behind on the highway.
Literally
They just
nothing.
they never show up again. Okay.
They just couldn't keep
I-
up with the cars.
I also wanted to see
Damn it!
like
Traffic.
Merovingians vampires like jumping around draining the blood out of people or something. Like when the Oracle mentions that and is like, oh, whenever you've heard these mysteries or this supernatural stuff, that's where the Matrix really shines, where it's like these things in our world that we recognize as the audience. It's like, oh, this is how it's explained in the Matrix world. And so it's like there was all these hints at it. And I'm like, that would have been so cool if Neo's fighting a vampire and a werewolf and a ghost. That would have been the greatest scene ever. But they just
I would watch
don't.
that.
Right.
Would watch that. How bad is the kissing scene in the bathroom with the Merovingian's wife?
Yeah.
Kiss
that
me
was
like you
weird.
kiss her. It was so bad.
Oh my god! I like
Luke's
this.
erased it from his memory.
Alicia had already gone to bed, and I described the scene to her. Where I was like, she just wants Neo to kiss her like he loves her like Trinity.
Like one of
And
his French
Neo's
girls.
just like, okay, all right, okay, that wasn't good. I'll do it now, probably. It's just so weird, and it goes for like a few minutes. Everything in the last two movies goes for like an extra 5 or 10 minutes more than it should.
Yeah, I think the
So-
editor is to blame for a lot of the problems in this movie or in Reloaded. It's like two and a half hours. It could have been easily an hour 20 if they just cut down so much of the rubbish. But
All right, enough talking
It's been
about
a
that.
1-2 hour movie. So
Yeah,
would have been a bit better.
maybe enough talking about the bad movies though. Let's talk about the best one, The Matrix. You guys got something to say about that? We can't end this podcast on such a sour note. Luke, how did you feel? How did you feel
Legacy
watching The
Nine.
Matrix again?
I loved it. Like, it's been probably 6 or 7 years since I last watched it, and I probably enjoyed this viewing more than I ever have before. I don't know, just being older and everything like that. I just was able to just sit down, enjoy it. I knew bad stuff was coming in the future, so I was just like, okay, time to sit down and watch this trilogy, and was just like, man, this is a good movie. And like, straight up, so I'll just go through, like, I just wrote down notes as I was going, and it's just like we touched on earlier. There's so many great iconic shots or scenes in this movie that have just lasted 20 years. The dodge it, like the bullet dodging and everything like that, the way they did that. Hugo Weaving in that film is just amazing. From like the first scene, like I think the office scene is great, like when he's trying to dodge him and he's going through the cubicles. I think that's like intense, and it's like, holy crap. And the interrogation scene in the police department where his mouth like disappears, it's all great, and Hugo Weaving's so intense in that film. But yeah, no, I can't gush about that film enough. Even like the whole shootout scene at the end when Neo and Trinity come in, that's like still one of my favorite scenes in all three movies, like with it, because it's just, I guess that's the first time you really see it in that way of dodging and running up the walls and people missing all the shots and hitting destroying all the walls and ceramic tiles and everything like that everywhere. But yeah, I think what really is good in that first movie is like the double agent. I forget his name, but the guy
Cyrus the Virus.
Yeah, like I think that adds a lot to it as well, and isn't it like
Cypher?
it's scary. It's Cypher, yeah. I thought it was Cypher.
I'm thinking of Con Air. Never mind. Don't worry. Don't bother.
That's like the second Cyrus the Virus in this podcast.
Yeah,
but
I said it before too. I'll have to go back and change it.
Yeah, no. So yeah, I think that adds a lot to it as well, and I think just him just unplugging people, it's brutal, and they just drop dead, and then that's them. They're gone. There is no coming back or putting your hand through their chest and pumping their heart up again or anything like that. They're done for.
Not like this.
The whole the whole
fine.
Tank scene. I think Tank was great in the first one. He disappeared for the
My
second
boy
one. I
Dozer.
read why. He turned out to be a douchebag in real life, but
Yeah, it's always a
it's
shame.
like that whole scene, like believe it or not or whatever, you're still gonna burn, and shooting him. It's great. I love Matrix 1's great.
How
Fun with
iconic! I just watching that movie, that first scene where Trinity like is running up to the phone booth and she grabs the phone and the truck bulldozes into it and destroys the whole building. Like that scene, like I just had shivers, like remembering how good that scene was the first time I saw it, not knowing anything else about what the hell is going on in this movie, and just being like, this movie is the coolest movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think The Matrix just came out at the right time. Like, it came out at a time when people were just starting to get the internet at home, and there was a lot of fear around like the Y2K bug and how that's going to affect our society, because now we're too reliant on computers. And I just think The Matrix just really struck while the pan's hot, but it's still relevant now, which is weird to me. But I
Yeah,
just really enjoyed that.
I think you're right. It's like 1999 was such a good year for film, and I think part of the reason why is because all these films like they were really tapped into like the zeitgeist and sort of the cultural consciousness of that time. Like The Matrix is the perfect example of that. Like all those reasons, it's just like it's personifies this sort of growing anxiety and like this postmodernism and this idea of what is reality, what is this future now coming out of sort of as capitalism in the West is starting to decline and things are a bit more like all the cracks start to show in society after about 50 years of, so especially like American growth, everything just starts to look a bit less perfect. And then it combines the great elements of like Eastern philosophy and martial arts with like Western sort of thoughts, and it's proposing these new meanings of like maybe what the West is missing is this stuff, or for a lot of people this was sort of the first collision of a lot of like this Eastern sort of ideas and like that kung fu and waifu. So people sort of seeing this for the first time, like, wow, there's this whole cinematic world outside of just like really generic American blockbusters, especially coming out of the 80s and 90s. It's like it was tapped into something and did a lot of good for, I think, for blockbuster films the next 20 years and beyond.
Is this the first movie to have parkour in it? Did Matrix invent parkour?
Parkour.
I just remember parkour being cool a few years ago, like being cool in all the movies a few years ago, but Matrix started it, I think.
Parkour will always be cool.
That's true.
I think you're probably right. It really did. I'm trying to think of like in video games. When was Prince of Persia out?
2001. But obviously there was early Prince of Persia games, but they weren't the same. As
they didn't really have parkour.
At the end of time.
I feel like this, you're probably right. This really did sort of start that.
I just think there's like very much a lack of parkour videos of people in trench coats, though. I need more parkour videos of people.
Well,
parkour fail videos of people in leather trench coats.
Yes, they'd be very short videos. People snapping themselves.
Yep.
How do you guys feel about the co-opting of the red pill and the blue pill by certain right-wing people? It's a bit of a shame. It's a bit of a shame.
It is.
It's a bit of a shame that red pill has come to mean this other thing.
Yeah, but it attests to that just how influential this is. Like, it's become synonymous like that. And I was thinking how there is no spoon. How even still sometimes that'll pop up somewhere, and just this idea, like these brief quotes and these very small concepts are how like Western society discusses these things. That's how we talk about the potential of a reality that doesn't exist. Well, it's like, the red pill and the blue, like red pill is truth. And so whenever you refer to truth, you refer to the red pill, and like there is no spoon. Everybody knows what that means, and that's sort of how we talk about it. It's so interesting how pervasive this film actually is.
That's the thing. Like I say that like twice a day, like there is no spoon. I'm like, where is it? Like in the kitchen. And it's always somewhere, but it's never in the washing. It's never in like, I don't know.
Gotta blame your kids for that, man.
Yeah, I know. They just hide spoons.
I think also something so good about this film is it's really rare to find a film that has action that is so uniquely flavored. Like the action in this film, you see it anywhere in any other film, and you know exactly what it's referencing. You can see it and be like, that's a Matrix thing. Like the bullet times come, like the trench coats and the sunglasses and the green tinge and the slow motion things and like flying off walls. All of that is like, there's just nothing generic about it. so unique, and like that is Matrix. That's how it's defined, and it's just really rare to ever find action films that are like you see a scene or it's got to say this like that's never been done before, and it has a distinct look about it, a sound about it, everything about it. It's like I'm thinking like Mad Max Fury Road sort of has that in a way. And there was one other film that I thought about, but I can't remember now what it is. But it just never happens. It's so cool.
So one thing I just wanted to touch on, and then you mentioned it exactly, like the sound. Man, how good is the soundtrack of the first one, and how quickly does it go downhill to generic? Like 2 and 3 are just generic action tracks, but the first one's soundtrack is amazing. Like it's great.
Yeah.
Even from the start, that Matrix, I don't even know how to describe it. That horns, the Matrix horns.
Yeah, that
is a cool way to start the.
It is. It is. I think this film also did the most for leather trench coats that has ever happened before. Apex Mountain for leather coats.
We can't copy another podcast categories. We'll get in trouble.
None.
How do you guys feel about Trinity's gimp suit? Like that was the costume that aged the worst to me. I think just so shiny and just looked incredibly uncomfortable to wear.
Yeah, no, no. I won't go into more. It's just anything in those films about it.
It fits in with the whole anime sort of inspiration of like female heroines in those wearing sort of like overtly tight and uncomfortable clothing. So I kind of like that sort of callback. But you're right, it's
awkward to see it in real life.
It is. I should have said it's animation.
Do you guys have any hopes or dreams for Matrix 4? Are you looking forward to it?
I'm
excited.
Cautiously optimistic. So only one of the Wachowskis are doing it, is that correct?
That's right.
It's not both of them. I don't know what it is or what it'll be. Obviously, like Neo's back, Trinity's back. Morpheus isn't.
Merovingian's back.
It's young Morpheus. Like a different actor to play him. Lawrence Fishburne's confirmed he hasn't been invited back. Agent Smith isn't back, so I'm not sure what they're going to do. Obviously, it doesn't seem like it's going to continue the story. So who knows? It'll be interesting. But I am cautiously optimistic, and I think enough time has passed that I think they can definitely reflect on what went wrong and hopefully come out with something better. And yeah, more Matrix should hopefully be good and it'll be fresh, I think.
Yeah, I love any sort of reboot that's had 15 years to ferment. It's like they've had enough time to really see how it's sort of what lessons have been taken from it, what sort of cultural loves for the project still exists, and so they can say, okay, this is what people remember, this is what worked. Whereas after a few years, you don't have enough hindsight, and so I'm keen just to see sort of more Matrix, and I think it will be really sort of not dulled down, but sort of grounded back to what the first one did. They know what not to do now.
Yeah, I'm keen for it too. I'm optimistic about it. Well, thank you for joining us on The Good, the Bad, and the Worst. The next film series we'll be discussing is the Indiana Jones films. We'll catch you next time.
Peace.
Peace.